Most people build habits like this. They pick a habit, try to do it every day, and when motivation's high, they either add another one or increase the difficulty of their habit. And for a week, it feels productive, but then everything collapses, and they assume the problem is their discipline. But the real problem is something else. They're building habits randomly and they're guessing. But the fastest habit builders don't guess, they use a system. And once you understand the system, habit growth and staying consistent stops feeling hard and it starts feeling like cheating. I'm Ashley Pierre, Director of Research at the Global Institute for Behavioral Sciences, as well as the author of the book Habit Theory. And in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about a framework that I introduced in my book called the Habit Theory system. I'm going to teach you the system that we developed so you can easily build habits without having to use willpower. And the cool thing is that it only takes 2 minutes a week to run and it changes everything. So the first step is that you need a calendar that you can place in your environment. I recommend this one on screen. It's the one I use. But for this video, I'm just going to be using this calendar. You want to list out all the habits that you're building. This video is part 2. I'd recommend watching part 1, which I actually show you how to define all the habits that you need to build. Every single day, we're going to be checking off if we did the habit. Now, here's where we can actually decide if we're able to add a new habit, increase the difficulty of our current habits, or if we have to make some changes actually and regress the current habits that we have. So this system that we're going to do only takes 2 minutes a week. It's going to seem really complicated at first, but it changes everything and it's actually really simple. So we're going to need to calculate 2 scores. The first score that we need to calculate is our global score. So how do we do this? Well, basically we need to count up our total completion rate for the week. So what we do is we see, okay, right now we're trying to build 3 habits and there were 7 days. So 3 times 7 equals a total of 21 possible times we could have done a habit. Now we calculate our completion rate by seeing how many times did we do the habit. Well, we can actually, it's easier if we just see how many times we did do the habit. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 minus 21 equals 17. So our total global score is 17 out of 21, right? Our global score is basically the weekly completion rate. So what you want to do is you want to turn this into a percent. So you can just divide 17 divided by 21 or 80%. So basically we got an 80% score this week. So now that we know our global score is 80%, we're actually able to see what type of week we're in. So there's 3 types of week that we could be in. We could be in a push week, a stabilize week, or a repair week. So what does this mean? If we're in a push week, that means that our total completion rate for the week was 85% or higher. And that means we're able to make increases. So we're able to add a new habit or increase the difficulty of a current one. If we're in a stabilized week, that means that our total completion rate, again, our global score, was a 70 to 84%, right? So somewhere in that range. That means that we're not able to add new habits. We're just focusing on stabilizing. And then the third is a repair week. So a repair week means that our total completion rate / global score was a 70% or lower. That means that we really struggle this week. We need to focus on repairing some stuff inside the system. That means that we are in a stabilized week this week. So the first step is to calculate your global score. That's going to show you what week that you're in. The next step is to calculate the local score. And this sounds like it's taking forever, it's a lot of work. This only takes 2 minutes a week. It's just, I'm explaining every single step and the reason behind every single step. But when you're actually doing this, it literally takes 2 minutes a week. So next step is to calculate our local score. So the local score is actually your score for each individual habit. So global score was total completion rate, local is completion rate for each habit. So for each habit, there's only 7 days that you could have done the habit. So first we look at reading. So looking at reading, on reading we did it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, didn't do it Saturday, we did it Sunday. So we got 6 out of 7. And for local scores, you can just do it as 6 out of 7 or just the numbers. You don't need to calculate it as percent. So now we have our local scores. So if you score for each individual habit a 6 or a 7 out of 7, that means that that habit is eligible for increasing. So increasing the difficulty. So for example, let's say right now for the reading habit, we're reading 10 pages a day. If it's eligible for increase, then next week we can increase it to reading 15 pages a day. If you scored a 5 out of 7, then you hold. So you can increase, it's not eligible for increase, but you also don't need to intervene and regress or simplify the habit. If you score a 3 out of 7 or a 4 out of 7 again, for each individual habit, if you score 3 or 4 out of 7, then you need to intervene because that means, that week you weren't really doing it, so we need to make an intervention. And if you score a 0 or a 1 or a 2 out of 7, then we need an aggressive intervention. That means really something is not working, again, with that individual habit. So we've calculated our global score, so we know what type of week we're in. Now we've calculated our local score. It's important that you do the global score first, because let's say that you're in a repair week. Even if you got a 6 out of 7 on a habit, you cannot increase it. So if you're in a repair week, no increase is allowed. And these rules are created because you don't want to be making it difficult when our data shows us that we really weren't performing as well as we could have that week. Because we really shouldn't be focusing on increasing difficulty, we should be focusing on stabilizing or repairing the system. And it's really important that you're honest with when you're tracking. This is really for you, so you can have accurate data to know exactly what is the correct action to take to make sure that you're not overwhelming your nervous system and you're not falling back into shame, treating your completion rate as data to see, okay, if we weren't performing that well this week, what went wrong? What can we change about our environment? We can regress the habit difficulty to make sure we don't fall back into shame and we stabilize. And you're also not able to add new habits in a stabilized week because you're not trying to increase or push, you're just stabilizing. So you only are able to have increases in a push week. So let's say that you're in a push week. Well, there are different combinations that you're able to do. The first combo is you're able to increase 2 habits. So let's say we want to increase reading from 10 pages a day to 15 pages a day. And then the second one is you want to increase deep work from working an hour a day to working an hour and 20 minutes a day. So that's one of the combos. We can increase the difficulty of 2 of our habits. The second combination we can make is we can add 1 new habit and increase 1 habit. So let's just say in our habit backlog, which is just a long list of habits that we eventually want to build, one of the habits we want to build is a writing habit. So let's just say we add a new one, make sure we're adding it at its minimum viable. I'll talk about that in another video. So we're just going to start with writing 5 minutes a day, right? So we're adding that as a new habit. And so we can add 1 habit and we can also increase 1 habit. So you cannot add 2 habits. It's very important. You cannot add 2 new habits. It's too much for our nervous system and system capacity. So only adding 1 habit a week. We can increase 2 habits, add 1 habit and increase 1 habit, or we can just decide to only add 1 habit or just increase 1 habit. Now, if you're in a push week, you don't need to add a new habit or increase a habit, but I recommend doing it because when you're building your dream life, you have a long list of habits that you need to build. And so if we were in a push week, that actually shows that last week we're able to do all the habits, so we might as well just increase the difficulty because that actually brings us closer to our dream life faster. There's 3 places that a habit can actually be. It can be active, dormant, or in maintenance. So active means that you're actively trying to build it. Dormant means it's in your habit backlog, so you're going to build it in the future, not yet. And maintenance means that the habit is at its max level. So for example, with deep work, let's just say your goal is to be working 6 hours of deep work per day, and you started at 5 minutes per day, and right now that habit is at 6 hours, and you've consistently hit a 6 out of 7 completion rate in the local score for that habit for at least 3 weeks. Now it's just in maintenance. You're not actively building it or increasing it because you're already at the 6 hours and you're just doing it every week. It's really easy. It's low negotiation. And it's important to say this because you can only have a maximum of 5 active habits at a time. A lot of people are trying to build like a whole bunch of different habits, but that's just going to overload your system capacity and your nervous system. So you want to make sure you're only installing 5 active habits at a time. And again, a habit moves from active to maintenance if the habit is at its max level of difficulty and you have consistently hit a 6 out of 7 local score on that habit for the past 3 weeks. So if you already have 5 habits in active and you just hit a push week, you can't add a new habit because you can only have 5 active habits at a time. You can only increase the difficulty of 2 habits or increase 1. If you are in a stabilized week, it's different. Again, there's no increases allowed because we're just trying to stabilize our current system. If you're in a stabilized week, you look at the local scores, right? So again, the local score is the score for each habit. And we know, okay, if it's 6 out of 7, it's eligible for increase, but only if you're in a push week, so no increases. If you got a 5 out of 7, you hold. But if you got a 3 or a 4 out of 7, you intervene. And if you got a 0, 1, or 2 out of 7, then you have to do an aggressive intervention. So if you got a 3 out or 4, but let's just say for reading, I had only done it 3 out of 7 days. That means I would need to make an intervention. So the rule is if it's 3 or 4 out of 7, then you regress one level. So what's a level again? Again, let's just say we're trying to build a reading habit. Last week we were reading 5 pages a day, but it was a push week, so we were able to increase to 10 pages. Since we scored a 3 out of 7 this week, it would be regressing back to the previous level, so going back to 5 pages a day. This might hurt and feel like you're going backwards, but in reality what you're doing is you are stabilizing or repairing the system. And what this actually does is it motivates you to actually want to be doing the habit throughout the week, because you don't want to feel like you're going backward. If you score low, you're going to have to regress to the previous week. So you want to actually, you're more likely to want to do the habit. So you regress one level if you got a local score of 3 or 4 out of 7. And if you got a local score of 0, 1, or 2 out of 7, that's aggressive intervention, so you actually regress 2 levels. So again, in a push week, you're able to do one of these combos, so basically increasing 2 habits, or adding 1 habit, increasing 1 habit, or just adding 1 new habit, or just increasing 1 habit. And for stabilize and repair weeks, you're not able to add any new habits, and you're just looking at the local scores and determining, is an intervention needed. Even if you are in a push week, but a habit has a local score of, let's just say, 3 out of 7, that specific habit is not eligible for increase. So for example, let's just say for deep work, we only scored a 3 out of 7. Even if we're in a push week, we can't increase that habit. So now you know exactly how to add new habits, how to progress the difficulty of the current habits you're installing, the different rules to follow. It's so much better to make decisions based on data and rules versus just based on how you feel. This only takes 2 minutes to do, and if you're consistently doing your weekly review, then you're going to be able to progress a lot faster, because you have a system that you're using and you're making decisions based on your performance. Anyways, I talk more about the weekly review in the Habit Theory method in my book Habit Theory, and if you want to work with me one-on-one, click the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.